everybody. I'm Anne Corgan. I'm Seattle-based interior designer and co-founder of Annuaire. Annuaire is a platform that is making it easier for designers and vendors to work better together. So if you want to know more about what that even means, go check out the website. But today we are here for the first episode of a series that we're starting called The Anatomy of a Room. We will be featuring a designer each month and showcasing one of our favorite rooms from their portfolio and really diving into kind of the nitty-gritty details of what it is about the room that we love, how they got there, their inspiration, process, and anything else in between. So today we're super excited for our first guest, Brian Paquette. He is also a Seattle-based interior designer. He has a beautiful furniture line with Lawson Fenning. He also has two beautiful books that he's published. And he also happens to be a friend of mine who is just so lovely. So I'm very excited that he is going to be here today. And I'm particularly excited. Oh, there he is. Hello. I'm really excited to dive into the room that we're talking about today because I think most people that are here today probably know who Brian is and are very familiar with his work. But the room that we'll be talking about today is in one of his books, but I think that it's a little bit of a different take on Brian Paquette interiors. So, anything you want to say?
I'm just excited to be here. Yeah, and I'm so glad you chose this project and specifically this room to do because I feel like it just, like you said, it kind of gets glossed over, but I think it has probably more stories than a lot of our projects. So I'm really excited to do this with you. So thank you for having me.
I love it. Okay, so we can kick it off. I'm curious because this particular client, if I did my research right, I believe that they're based in New York, but this
That's
home is
correct.
in the Pacific Northwest. It's up on Whidby Island, which is a beautiful, kind of typically like second home, summer home kind of spot. So how did this client find you?
Yeah, so you're right. The client is based in New York, and this is the home on Whidbey has been in her family for, I mean, at this point, probably like 70 years, and it's gone through a couple of different iterations. The client found us randomly through a designer friend of mine and her designer, Ashley Whitaker, who's based in New York, who had done two homes for her on the East Coast. And when the client asked Ashley if she wanted to do this project out here. Ashley was just a little too busy and quickly recommended that she contact me, which was incredibly flattering and just so lovely. And so, yeah, we linked up, and the project was, I think, like we'll sort of dive into, was seemingly out of my kind of quote unquote range, but I really like to challenge that. And I think, as you'll discover, um, there's actually a lot more ties, design wise to this sort of design than maybe what people are more known or what I'm more known for in my work. So this should be really interesting.
I love it.
So,
Okay, well, I think we've built the suspense long enough. Let's reveal the room and the project. Um, so we will be diving into the living room here in this beautiful home on Whidbey Island. And I think, when we keep saying, oh, this is so different than Brian's kind of typical work, I feel like, what I think of when I think of you is a very kind of earthy palette. I mean, it is very kind of representative of the Pacific Northwest, which, as an aside, we'll get to. You are not originally from here. Um, and I think just really integrating like textures and tones and layers in that way. But I think when we look at this, we're obviously seeing a lot of really just red, white, and blue. So I'm just wanting to know
yes.
how clear was that directive from the client? Like, was that was that it? Is that all she wanted to
It was
see?
crystal clear. Yeah, it was. It wasn't. Yeah, the directives were. I guess I would say there was like three directives: red, white, and blue, almost exclusively, which I then fought against for a couple of the spaces, which we probably won't dive into today. But there, it is not exclusively red, white, and blue. Another thing was sort of harkening back to one of the eras of the design where the entire house was only covered in blue and white ticking. So that's one thing. And then, yeah, it was really just about like honoring her mother who had recently passed, and kind of bringing this era that she remembers when she was a child sort of back to life. Her and her family really only spend like 1 week a year here, which is in and around like it's either the Fourth of July weekend or Labor Day weekend. Because they're just just busy on the East Coast. But she just really wanted to keep this house in the family, and let other family members use it. But yeah, that was the directive for the project, was red, white, and blue, without being overly no flags.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that that's
Yes.
actually more of a challenge than anything is to have like such a tight palette and then to be able to have to like bring interest in other ways. And I'm curious, like I mean, there are a million different types of blues and
Mm.
reds, but I actually feel like that could be more challenging to have all those blues play well together.
Yeah, I'm trying to, obviously, this project was completed 6 years ago, something like that. So I'm trying to, like as I was thinking about this space, like trying to get back into my head. And, I'm not someone who wants everything, like if there's multiple shades of a similar color like blue in a room, I don't want it to be super, super matchy matchy. Like in the same way, I sort of refuse to get cuttings for approval to like make sure that the two, you know, um, like colors really match. Just because I want there to be chance. I want there to be like this sort of collectedness of a room in a less collected way, which, often interior design can be. Like most of these pieces were installed in a 2 or 3 day period. And so it wasn't done organically, but how do you do that organically? And I think that by not matching all of the blues or the reds or the tones in the room, we achieved that by making it feel more collected. So,
Sure.
yeah.
No flags. I love it. Well, and I mean, as an aside, like if I read it correctly too, red is your least favorite color. Is that still the case?
Yeah, what's funny is like it's like these hard and fast rules that I have, probably put myself in. I would say I probably wrote that in the book, and that book came out, gosh, like 4 years ago. I would not limit myself in that way anymore. I would not put so many absolutes. I'm literally wearing red, which is I just realized like this is not it's a coincidence. It was not planned. Um,
Yeah.
but no, I think I don't hate any color. I think it's just all in context. Um, but it's not a color that gets used a lot for me out in the Pacific Northwest normally, because to me it doesn't necessarily feel right or whatever. But I feel like, I mean, there could be arguments in so many different ways about how it feels absolutely right. So I
I love
think
it.
it's all personal preference. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, we are going to take it. And now that we've seen the room, we're going to kind of like start back from the beginning, um, as to where I imagine most designers start with their kind of inspiration for the project. And I know, the client came to you with a pretty clear directive on the palette and everything, but I really love you talk a lot about, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to reference my notes because what do you call it? It's so reference and sense memory, which I've like
Yeah.
never, I love it. Okay, so there's like
Yeah.
that piece of inspiration, which I want to dive into. But then there's also, like the visual components that contribute to the inspiration.
Yeah.
You can kind of have you touch on both of those things and you can decide where you want to start.
Yeah, sure. I mean, not reference and sense memory are like really important to the design process, but you don't always get like super deep
Oh,
references or sense memory for people. Whether maybe the house is brand new. It's like ground up house. This house came with tons of reference and sense memory. Like it had been around in the family forever, and there was just so many stories. And then when you're dealing with traditional design versus something that's a little bit more contemporary, there is so many more references to pull from. It's not just now. It is like where is the design coming from? What designers are you looking towards versus being like utterly in the present moment? And so, the reference and sense memory for this house, came directly from her childhood memories all the way up through adulthood. And we also wanted to reference the fact that like this house could have been designed very differently. It is on Whidby Island, and there's probably houses around it on this in this beach community that look nothing like this. And so she wanted to bring, an East Coast traditional sort of classic sensibility to this house. And so there's that reference. And I mean, gosh, those references, oodles of references for days and days and days, from different designers, for that. So it was really interesting to just dive into that. My own personal reference comes from the fact that I am from Newport, Rhode Island, which is, sort of the birthplace of WASP design, and and like kind of the original Hamptons. And so while I don't get to personally design in this style, and maybe I don't live in this, I have a lot of reference from it because I grew up around it. And the first firm I worked for worked solely in this manner. And so I pulled a lot of references from my time back on the East Coast there, and just sort of, it kind of really flowed out of me. This project, it was like something had been waiting, and like the second I got the opportunity to design like this, it just kind of like, it just went so fast and so easily.
I
Yeah.
love it. It's like, I mean, like you've already said, it's not like it was like for her to know, okay, I know Brian can do this. It's not it's like
Yeah.
something in your portfolio before, and then to have it just come
No.
actually is like,
No, it was really all based on trust. Like she had worked with Ashley for, however many years on two different properties, and she trusted Ashley implicitly, and Ashley in turn trusted me, which is just insane. Um, Now that I think back on it, to just do this. And I did feel like I felt a weight to like honor not only the client, obviously, in this house that is specific to her and her family, but also the trust that Ashley had in me that I would serve her client.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, so let's dig into some of the because you kind of mentioned now like where you were heading, but then
Yes.
I want to know more like as we look at some of these inspiration images that facilitated it, like I would love to know. I feel like this is such a kind of vague question. Like, what was your inspiration for this? And it's like, oh my God, I don't know, this picture. And it's like, well, did you take like the art from it? Did you take this? Like, and how does that process work? Are there things you're picturing in your mind and then you're trying to go and find the images to support that to show your client? Or just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I would say this specific project, I already had it in my mind. I didn't need to dig very far for this. There's many projects, nowadays where it's like a new build where I am digging. I have the thing in my mind, but I need to go find the image that exists to kind of like maybe kind of describe it. Um, this project was the total opposite. It's like I had a file in my head that was not being used, and it was for this project. The image we're looking at now is from House Beautiful in 2007. It was actually my former boss's house in Newport. Um, and an old sort of house on the point. This house probably, 16th or 17th century house. So, and these houses are not, you don't own them, you rent them from the historical society, or kind of like, I can't remember exactly the rules, but this image particular is this formality stripped down, right? Like these were old ship captains' houses. And so there's that element of like Whidby Island and like, and boats and all that kind of stuff. And so you see like an old room that was a kitchen. There's a fireplace in it. And there's a lot of like, I don't know, like it used to do this thing, but now because we live in this modern way, it has to serve these purposes. My boss also loved a lot of primitive art, and you'll see that above the fireplace there. And then there's like these red, white, and blue elements in here. There's the blue and white transferware, which he was really fond of, and then there's these pops of green. And so this image was really important to me when I was thinking about the house.
Love it. Yeah, and just like the
Yeah,
material, like we're
yeah,
very,
exactly. Very honest kind of
yeah,
materials.
humble materials, I think
Yeah.
is useful.
Um, so this is a room in the Hamptons by Robert Stilland, who's one of my personal favorite designers, and is probably someone that I would have design my home. And I remember thinking about this image when I first got the project, and I kind of wanted to lean the project more this way. And I showed the client this, and she was like, "Yes, you're so sweet, so sweet. Yes, but." I really want to see a lot of, blue and white ticking. And, I think we could lean a little bit more traditional. And she showed me some of like Ashley's work, and Meg Braff's work and Markham Roberts' work. And I was like, okay, I got it. And so it was just really interesting for me to sort of knee jerk to go to this type of thing, which while it is red, white, and blue, leans a little bit more contemporary or a little bit more traditionally masculine per se. And so we kind of like quickly went, from this to what you'll see next, which this is a house. I don't know where this is located, but this is a house that was done by Markham Roberts, who is also one of my favorite designers. Um, that is just collected and so maximalist, and nothing really matches, but it all goes together. And this was just pulled together over years, versus moments. And yeah, I just love how sort of organic and undecorated and unfussy it is. Then this is Ashley Whitaker, the designer I mentioned before. And this gets a little bit more tailored, right? Like it's still very collected and it is very casual. You've got, rush matting on the floor, and you've got this mix of like, cafe chairs with, federal furniture, and then one of Ashley's like sort of classic banquettes. But it still feels really fresh and fun. And so, of course, that was a big influence for the house as well. What's next? Oh yeah, and then just Ashley's use of red really kind of gave me confidence to use it. And there's some ticking stripe on that bench cushion, and some florals and some ecots. But yeah, I kind of really had to gain confidence when it came to this red at that point. I was like, I need to see some images where it's used in a way where I feel good about it. And so this was one of those images. This is another image of my former boss's house from House Beautiful back in 2007. And here, once again, it's like there's shutters and white slip covers and British imports and Chinese exports and just all of these things together. But it's really relaxed and collected, and I love that it's all of these things, yet it's like nothing. It's truly like sort of like his style, and so that was a big reference for me as well.
Well, I also think
Um,
lines of the furniture have a lot to do with it because I think in that initial image that you mentioned, you had shown her, um, the was it? Now I'm gonna butcher it. Robert Stone.
it was Robert Stillen, yeah, 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 yeah. Everything's more
The ones
soft
in
now.
that were like a lot cleaner and like the
Yeah.
box top sofa and all that. And then when we look at like the where you ended with our living room, I mean the bend on the sofa and on the chairs and just gives a little more, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just sort of like a little bit more. It's like we went from like Joseph Franck, like in this sofa here, to something that's just like a little bit more traditionally feminine or curved, just to add some softness to it. And I think the client really appreciated that. And obviously there's leg detail and some swoops and some interesting shapes to take those patterns. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so once you guys were aligned on kind of inspiration, direction, getting all that situated, okay, then typically I feel like we go to floor plan, furniture
Hmm.
layout,
Yeah,
um, pop that up and take a peek. And
yeah.
I'm just like, I think a lot of design is driven by obviously how many people you want to like comfortably sit, what you're planning
Yep.
on doing in that. I mean, usually in a living room, you're going to be sitting, chatting. But were there any other considerations for floor plans, or was this kind of
Yeah,
the one?
so it was, basically two focal points, the fireplace and then the view out those French doors. And, like how can you enjoy both at the same time? Um, the client actually would come out here by herself to do, she was a writer. So she would come out here in the winter. And so we wanted it to equally feel warm and cool at the same time. So like if you were here in the winter and she showed up and it was freezing, she could really warm up the place really quickly. And so that's kind of where the reds come in. But the floor plan itself was pretty easy. It's like it's not the smallest room in the world, but it's not the biggest. And there's so many entrance points and exit points. Like you enter the house, there's two entries to the kitchen. There's an entry to a back hallway, and then there's an entrance up to the stairway, as well as an entrance to the deck. And so there's so many. Everything kind of had to be floated, aside from the few pieces that were put against the minimal walls that are here, and we'll get into that. But yeah, the floor plan was kind of dictated just based on all of those entrances.
Perfect. Yeah, I love it. Okay.
Um,
So once you dial that, which looks great, then you go into like
thanks.
mood board presentation. Uh,
Yes.
so I love to understand how other designers present. Like, are you going full home? I mean, I know what we're looking at here is specifically the living room, but
Yeah.
I mean, I see the Schumacher, like the trim that was on the base of the sofa.
Yeah.
Um, like you are so dialed here on this mood board. I feel like
That's
I'm so,
funny.
but
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
funny that you say that.
talk to me about that. Are you really, are you
Yes,
like,
so this is not what I showed the client. This is my head working through the process. So while someone else was like at the time doing like the technical work, like doing the floor plan, I was out scrambling because I probably didn't have a single red fabric in our library. And so I was at the design center and like ordering samples from a bunch of different places. So this is kind of like a working mood board. Most of it ended up in the space, but there's definitely some elements that you see that were not in the space, and those elements were probably the more like kind of contemporary elements. And we really just were like, no, let's go traditional. So getting back to your question about how we presented this house. She flew in from New York. We planned 4 hours at our studio with her. We actually had ordered lunch to be brought in 2 hours into the presentation. We presented the entire house, every single detail to her, down to like the plates and napkins and every little detail. She
wow,
was there. She didn't say a word. She was there for 1 hour. And then she gave me a hug. And then she was like, I'm off to go see my cousin for lunch. And an hour later from that, lunch showed up for the rest of us. And we were done and we were on our way. There were no changes made whatsoever to the
amazing.
presentation, and we were sort of off and running. Um, Yeah, and yeah, it was just kind of like she did her homework. She trusted us implicitly, and she really wanted to see our full vision. And that's how we still do presentations. Like we really want people to see full vision. So,
Right.
um, because this isn't what they do every day, and so I kind of want to give people full context for space. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to dive a little bit more also into the art because it's interesting
Mm,
that, well, for so many reasons I want to talk to you about art because for people who might not know, that's where you really come from and that's what you studied. You are an artist, and I imagine that you are. I imagine that
thanks.
that really influences your process, and I think that it's such a subjective piece of this whole thing, and I feel like
Mhm.
there's so much incredible art in this project. I just want to like understand how was a lot of that happening from the beginning? Did that influence like just I'm not even really
Yeah,
asking you.
yeah, yeah, totally. If we can go to like the overall picture of the room, I think this will be sort of helpful for me. But yeah, the art was considered while I was designing the space. Like I knew in my head, I guess a lot of the art came from the references of the home of my former boss and kind of how he did art. And there was like, obviously the bones were super traditional. Most of his furniture forms were pretty traditional and like the textiles he used and everything like that. But when it came to his art, there was a lot of reference around modernism, sort of like outsider art, and really like sort of simple, minimal pieces. And I loved the juxtaposition of that in his homes and in his work as well. And so I took a trip right around when we were designing this to Paris. And so all of these prints from Matisse, like all of these blue and white prints from Matisse, were found at Marché des Puces during that trip. And they're all over the house. I think there's like 16 throughout. And then there's if we can go to the image that has the flower painting as well. Yeah, that one. This I immediately thought of. I think so. The artist here is Wayne Pate, who I love. I love that he sort of paints from a primitive style, and I just loved these colors. And what I loved about this was that it was reds and blues, but they weren't going to be like, I mean, there's like maroon and like kind of like a lighter blue here, and then this sort of initial introduction of green into the space. And green is going to always be in every house I do. It's kind of like it's in whether it's flowers or it's something you see outside or it's the upholstery of a chair. It's going to be omnipresent throughout the house. Um, and so that was something we looked at. We also the client really liked Serena Duggan from Serena and Lily. She had started showing her work at the time, and so there's a few pieces from there in the house. There's some pieces that were found in the house, like some old landscape paintings that we just sort of had reframed. Um, yeah, so there's art from all over. So it's a mix, and I kind of feel that's how I collected it. Definitely over the process of the project, that took about a year to complete. But like I said before, it was like there was this file in my head that immediately had all these ideas that was just sort of like waiting to execute. So yeah,
I love it.
yeah.
So from like an approval standpoint, I mean, I love the like real dorky nitty gritty. Are you having to like, I mean, are you in Paris marching around being like, okay, these are the Matisse, or she's just like, trust, go for it,
Full
get what you
trust. Yeah, we took on after that presentation, I knew that I could ask for an art budget and an accessories budget, and she didn't question it one bit. And so I had an art budget and I had an accessories budget, and I spent every penny. And she did not see. She saw all of the furniture, everything like that was designed, but she didn't see any of that until she walked into the house.
That's amazing. Do you do an
Yeah.
art budget and an accessory budget for every project?
I would say 75%. 75, I would say 90% of our projects get an accessories budget, and 75% of our projects get an art budget. Mind you, I have never worked in a way where we are not showing the art to the client prior
Yeah.
since this project. This was the only project where I've ever brought in art, like without the client approving it. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah.
And that kind of parlays a little bit into another question around like antiques and vintage
Mm,
pieces. I feel like that's so important into like, I mean, everybody I think feels that it just gives
mm,
this like feeling of interest and personality. But again, I feel like that can be a bit of a challenge because, unless you're going to like a cherish or a first dibs, which is great, and putting something on hold and whatever, sometimes you can like miss the moment. So
mhm.
how do you have any like tips or if you had any?
Yeah, so this is a really good question, and I feel like it kind of like puts me on blast here. So antiques terrify me. Vintage shopping, it's like I love it, but when it comes to the client process, it's one of those things where it terrifies me. And so, frankly, we don't do it a ton. We don't do it a ton for two reasons: what I just explained, and also a lot of our clients don't really come to us for vintage or antique. Like they're not there. So the pieces in this, I don't know if I bought like vintage accessories and I bought vintage art, but furniture wise, anything that's in this home that was vintage came from the home or came from the clients. And we can talk about, there's that picture of the white painted chest. In this room, there's a really interesting story there, that there was two white painted chests that Ashley Whitaker had bought for the client for another home, and they ended up not fitting. And I saw them, and the client was like kind of showing me things that she had in New York, that if I wanted anything, she would ship it out to me. And these two things it was these two things, and I think a rug that's in that living room. Um, and and so we used one in the living room here as is, and I just loved that scale and like the texture of that white against white. And then the other one is actually used in a laundry room, which we're not going to look at. That's right around the corner, actually, from this, and they fit like perfectly. Like it was just so great. But yeah, I don't have the best answer when it comes to vintage. Hopefully someone else will have a better answer for you.
Oh, God. Okay, actually, this image is great because, I mean, really getting into the nitty gritty here, but I'm
Yeah.
always curious about like selecting, let's just say you're kind of like pulling all these beautiful fabrics and you're like, oh, I know I want this. I want to see linens. I want some obviously ticking. And then determining like which piece types those fabrics are going on. I mean, I feel
Mhm.
like obviously, like, let's just put materiality and durability and all
Yeah.
that aside. I mean, I could see a world in which that Zach and Fox is on the sofa or vice versa.
Mhm.
And I think in some ways, like I might have been, I mean, I don't, where's the seam on that sofa? Because it's all,
Yeah, so yeah, I know. I think there's a couple of things here. I think if the client had her way, I think she probably would have, or like the not her way, but I think her initial idea, she probably would have put that Ralph Lauren, which is it's an outdoor ticking. Great,
Mhm.
awesome for a beach house. She would have put that on all of the upholstery in the entire house. Like kind of very like Victoria Hagan, Bill Blass, like really just like picking a hero fabric and doing it and keeping it really simple. I challenged her because I wanted it to sort of have more of the spirit of like a really collected house and less of a decorated house. And so, but I knew how much she loved that ticking, and so we were going to take the largest piece of upholstery and put that ticking on it. And then it was kind of like, okay, well, like how are we going to, I don't know, like, yeah, like apply, like you said, like these other fabrics. And I loved this Khotan fabric from Zach. And I just thought like that and doing a contrast welt, which I don't know if you can see, there's like a contrast welt on that piece to really sort of like show the lines and all of the curves of those chairs. I'm trying to remember. Oh no, those chairs are Hollywood at Home as well. But they've got this like great swooping and they're a really deep seat. And then kind of like throwing a wrench in the color scheme, or not, I guess not in the color scheme, but just that bold chaise that's in the background, that's just kind of like this blood red, and has all the tufting. And so you've got tufting, you've got loose seat construction, you've got curves, you've got really simple legs, you've got casters, and I feel like it's the mix there that makes it feel less decorated, more collected. And so that's kind of how I went about it in this way. Um, and to her pleasure, I did use that. Um, did use that ticking in other places. So yeah,
on the curves and everything. I know. Well, I also just like want to have a moment for that pattern matching, which you probably can't see on this image, but
yeah,
in
it's great. Like the on the curve of the sofa, they did an incredible job. Those guys are incredible. Yeah,
okay, well, so let's chat a little bit about the products.
yeah, yeah,
Because I mean, a big part, I think, of just making things feel interesting are discovering new vendors, new
yeah.
products to go. So let's take a peek and chat about some of the favorite things that you incorporated.
Yeah. So the first one, obviously, we were talking about this, is this great Khotan fabric. Khotans are normally on rugs, right? Like that's what that term comes from. And I love this like faded version that's done in this really sweet blue on white um, ground. And I just love, love, love that fabric. The next piece. Um, let's see what we got. Oh, yes. So one of the things that I immediately thought when I thought of this house was splatterware, and like Italian splatterware. And so March does this incredible collection of all different colors, not just blue and white, but the entire dinnerware collection for this house was done in this blue and white splatterware, and I just love how informal it is, but it's just so fun. Um, the next piece is, I believe it's a lamp. Um, yes, this is the first and only Christopher Spitzmiller lamp that I have purchased for a client. I love his lamps. And this is like probably the least formal lamp that he does, but it's this matte faux lamp, matte white, which most of his lamps are like sort of high gloss ceramic. And I just love this. It's like, it's traditional and fancy, but also like a little humble. And yeah, I just love that. And in our project, we paired it with this like bright red lacquer lampshade just to kind of just throw it off a little bit. Um, the next piece, yes, okay. So Artifacts is a company in Connecticut, so another East Coast, fine. But I just loved this sort of. I don't know. I think of this as kind of like sort of a mid-century kind of vibe to it, and it feels like coral, and it's matte white with a cement top. So once again, it's like traditional design but really humble materials, and I just love how light it is. I mean, it's technically a very heavy table, but you could see the rug, the vintage rug that was underneath it in the room, and I just love this piece. That's really really great. And the last piece, this is another fabric. So Sewn was another vendor that I wanted to bring into this house. This fabric was actually used in the primary bedroom in this house, which we may look at, we may not get to. But this fabric, I mean, I'm still obsessed with this fabric. It's printed on silk, but like a really rough hewn sort of raw silk, and the colors and the inks are just so divine. And this is something that I don't know if I would have used without sort of digging into like more of like Ashley or Markham's work, because I think I would have felt a little less confident in this type of fabric. But I'm really glad that we went for it. So yeah, so
Really
those are some of the things that we used. Yeah, thanks.
I love it. Okay, so fun. So we're gonna move on and do a little Q&A and see what kind of questions people have for you aside from
Cool.
me. So let's see what we have. Okay.
Best piece of advice you have for young designers. Two, get an accountant as soon as you possibly can, number one. And number two is wait to get published until for a while. Don't put yourself out there in the world. Like really do all that dirty first client work where you're making all the mistakes and kind of figuring out your style. Like yeah, and I would say that rolls into like really figure out who you are. There's 9 million designers in the world. What are you offering? Don't just be like everybody else. Like what are you bringing to the table creatively? And then yeah, just really focus on client relationships. Aesthetics is the given, right? Like we're all creatives. We can do the aesthetics and the creativity in our sleep, but the client relation, like we're not all business people, and so really focusing on client relationships is really really important.
Love it. Okay. So next question. Did you collaborate or share ideas for this project with other designers, or do you work pretty solo?
um Aside from like internally, which there was two other designers in at my firm at the time that worked on this project with me. I don't think I did. No, that's not true. I definitely sent all the imagery to my friend Grant Gibson, who's a designer now based in Maine, because I think I was just so like befuddled by the idea that I had this project, and I just like I needed to like throw it at him as well too. So yeah, yeah,
I love it. Um, okay. Oh, fun. Curveball. If you
yeah.
weren't an interior designer, what would you do?
I think I would try to be a fine artist. Like I have this like goal in my mind that I'm gonna be like some old man in the woods in a giant barn, painting like canvases that are like 8 feet by 16 feet, and just kind of like, yeah, I think that's probably what I would do. Yeah.
So good. Um, okay, I have a little bit of a rogue one. So I like
Yeah.
to find a little bit of where the anatomy of a room came from. Um, I like to look at like an image and try and understand like what is it about this image that either really resonates or like why does it not resonate? And like really pick it apart because I think it's easy to look at something and say, oh, that's so beautiful, but like why?
Ah,
Or what if like one little thing changed, how would it make it feel different? So reflecting back on that on the room that we were talking about,
yeah.
is there any little change you would make to give it like a little bit of a different feel or
Yeah, I think now, like I said, is 6 years ago. I think if I designed this room now, it would be a lot simpler. It would be a lot cleaner. All of the lines, like the traditional, I think there would just be less stuff. I think I would, um, I now labor more on decision, and I'm really, really picky about the less and better items that are in a room. Um, but it's, hindsight is 2020, so it's really interesting to think about. I love that question because it's like I feel like you could do that for every project, right? We're always criticizing and dissecting our previous work. Yeah.
okay, oh, this is a good one. So someone watching wants to know, they'd love to hear more about how you back into the art budget because it feels
Mm,
really hard to get to a number that clients are not going to be totally taken aback by, but that
yeah.
also gives freedom to find good pieces.
Yeah, so I would say I'll say in particular this project. This is one of a few homes that the client has, and we weren't looking to invest heavily into art in this project. And she made that very clear, that she wanted really interesting things, and she was fine to buy original art, but we weren't looking to buy blue chip investment pieces for this. And so that type of budget is just a lot more easy. Um, have I made an art budget, like a number budget, since then? No. Never have. And the reason being is that value systems are very different and attachment is very different, and it becomes a lot more of an organic process. So, since this project, there has not been an art budget. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. Um,
Oof.
oh, okay. I love that you can see them. Okay, when looking
Yeah.
for certain fabrics, wallpaper, etc., how do you find exactly what you're looking for? Hmm,
I just don't stop. That's the hard thing about our industry is, gosh, especially with rugs, it's limitless, right? Like you can. But I think, I kind of go back to the idea where I had these files in my head about like a project like this, or really like any project. And I just dig. I get, if I'm looking for, say, a stripe, I'm going to get 50. And
hmm,
I'm going to look at all 50, and I'm going to have them, from different vendors and, different price points, and I'm going to have them all delivered. And I'm really going to go through that. And I kind of do that with every fabric. It's a mohair, and I want a ochre mohair. Okay, well, I want to see 60 of them. Like, send them to me. And I think it's just kind of that. I think you really got to put in the work. You can't just be like, oh yeah, that fabric worked one time, I'm just going to use it again. Yeah.
when you kind of touch on it too in your book of just like referring back to that,
Mm,
um, what's my problem? Why can't I reference and
yeah, reference and sense memory. Yeah. It's just easy. Like if you
like
have a
as a
touch point,
yeah.
yeah, it's like it's having a look and feel. Like you always have a reference point if you're stuck with something. So yeah.
Okay, our last question. What is inspiring you today?
Oh my gosh. You and like doing this. Like I think this is like incredible that you're doing this. Yeah, I don't know, I like to see my friends excel, and I like to see, um us all sort of embrace like new ways of sharing our work. So this is really, honestly, this is really, really inspiring me today.
Wow. Well, certainly didn't ask it for that answer, but
Yeah.
okay. Well, this was just such a treat. I feel like so fun to kind of dig into the behind the scenes on a project that I think clearly meant a lot to you in that relationship with the client. And I don't know, maybe we'll start seeing some more red,
Oh,
white,
I
and
would love it.
some
Maybe
more
not red, white, and blue, but more traditional work. Like bring it on. Would love it.
love it. All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. And I think that's all we got for today. I don't know. That's it. Okay.